Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
All right, the Electoral College. When was this implemented?
At the founding of the country. It's in the Constitution.
Oh, so this has always been.
Well, the words, the Electoral College, is nowhere to be found, but the Constitution talks about electors that vote for the president.
Any idea where they got this idea from?
So I'm trying to think back to my political philosophy classes in college, but this was a point of real contention in the Constitutional Convention. You had those proponents like Alexander Hamilton who almost wanted the president to have a life tenure, to almost be like a king. And of course, people like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison immediately shot that down and said, we just fought a war to get rid of these lifetime monarchs. And of course, Hamilton said, well, you can elect a new one when they die. And they said, well, that's not really good enough. And so, I'm not going to pretend to be an Electoral College scholar, but it's interesting because in many ways, the federalism system that we have in our country between federal government and the state government is almost, at least a lot of times, out of sight, out of mind. We don't really think about the clashes.
It really
there.
is, yeah.
But the framers really imagined more of a conglomeration of states than one big country. They wanted something stronger than the Articles of Confederation that existed before the Constitution, because under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government couldn't levy any taxes. They had a very difficult time getting anything done. States had to volunteer their money, and of course, no one did. And so you had all these war debts that the federal government incurred to fight off the British, and yet the states didn't want to pay their fair share. So a lot of those things led to the real collapse of the Articles of Confederation. And then they established certain things like what's called the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution that says federal law, pretty much, if there's a conflict, it's going to trump state law. You can't have a state law that tries to overrun a federal law or the Constitution. But there is still this big deference for states. And so the Electoral College was a way to do that. The founders did not envision a winner-take-all system for the Electoral College. The way all the Constitution says is you get the number of electors as you have representatives and senators. So that's your electoral vote. It's basically equal to your representation in the Congress, but you can't have congressmen or senators be the electors, right? You can't, nor could the president be an elector, or the Secretary of State, or any employee of the federal government, really, anybody holding an office. It says an office of trust or profit for the United States can't be an elector, but anyone else can. And states are entitled to appoint the electors however they want to. And typically they're appointed by a body, by the legislature, by the governor, every state's different. I don't even know how Tennessee appoints theirs. But they appoint these people who then cast their vote for president. And it was designed that this body would be deliberative. It would be, in a way, above the fray of the kind of majoritarian rule of maybe the passions of the day. To have, at that point, they were thinking maybe more educated, literate. At that point, definitely only white landowning men would be in the Electoral College. No women, African Americans were considered 3/5 of persons at the time of the founding, so definitely not African Americans. It is designed to be this kind of bourgeoisie, almost deciding who the president should be. And at some point in the early 1800s, states started moving towards this winner-take-all model by passing laws saying, okay, electors, when the people are going to go vote for the president, you have to, whoever gets the most votes, you have to cast your vote for that person.
In that state.
In that state. And actually, James Madison kind of panicked and thought this is going to ruin the Electoral College, but he didn't really have any way to stop it. The only other big movement to abolish the Electoral College happened in the 1970s. There's actually a great New York Times daily podcast from, I think, earlier this week or last week that talked about this, and it had a lot of momentum. It actually had enough support in 3/4 of the states to amend the Constitution.
Had support on both sides, too,
it had
right?
Support on both sides. Yep. It passed the House of Representatives with a 2/3 majority. So just, for the listeners, to amend the Constitution, you have to have 2/3 of the House and the Senate, and then 3/4 of the states vote on the amendment. So we're talking
I didn't know that.
Super majorities.
Yeah.
And this bill to amend the Constitution and abolish the Electoral College and make it based on the popular vote was killed in the Senate because of the filibuster. So it never passed the Senate, never got 67 votes.
and just never got picked up again since in a meaningful manner, or never caught any kind of significant momentum since?
So for the most part, the elections between the numbers of on the popular vote and the number of electoral college votes have pretty much tracked. There hasn't been a huge divergence. So typically, whoever wins the popular vote also wins the electoral college. The math may look a little weird, but the outcome is pretty much the same. That all changed in 2000. If you'll recall, the Bush v. Gore, all the way to the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court today. The Supreme Court ultimately told different districts in Florida stop counting votes that very well may have gone towards Al Gore, and that tipped all those electoral votes in Florida in favor of George W. Bush, and he became the president. And that was really the first time in our generation where people kind of maybe woke up to this idea that, wait, hang on a minute. So all the people in the country, the majority, can vote for candidate A, but candidate B still wins because certain states like Florida and Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania have this outsized view because of their demographics. And then that was even brought home more in 2016, where President Trump lost the popular vote by several million votes, yet still won because of basically 66,000 votes in 3 states. And that's pretty astonishing.